Back at it, back again here with another episode of Mountaineer Report on West Virginia Sports Now and available everywhere you get your podcasts. Of course, here also on YouTube and throughout the WVSN network. Wonder what we're going to talk about. It's a West Virginia show, a WVU football show. Wonder what we're going to talk about. At least that's the topic today. WVU football once again, because the Mountaineers are still in full swing trying to fix the season. But today included some major news that maybe will concern more of the future of the Mountaineer program than the present. Mike Asti here, going to be joined by Luke Blain in a moment. Again, Mountaineer Report here via West Virginia Sports Now, everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. And what I'm alluding to, everybody who follows the Mountaineers, who follows the WVU football program, already knows Nicco Marchiol is going to receive a medical red shirt for this season. He will not return. No surprises there. And really also no surprise that the expectation now is that he will enter the transfer portal and will end his tenure as a Mountaineer and will not be the quarterback for next season. So, Luke, we finally have the news that I think everyone who's been paying attention kind of has expected for a while. And it's not a surprise at all, but what are just your initial thoughts on not only the medical red shirt and no more Nicco this year being official, but also that he's likely going to enter the transfer portal? The expectation right now, I've always heard that, but national outlets are now picking up on that as well. And that it's likely going to be a different starting quarterback to open up next year, whether it's somebody on the current roster, Khalil Wilkins, Scotty Fox, who knows, or they bring in another veteran like Jalen Henderson to compete with them, probably another competition. But just your thoughts on the end of the Nicco Marchiol era for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, well, he actually kind of stole my thunder today because I was fully prepared. I was thinking about this a lot, and I was fully prepared to say that this is what he should do,
Right.
is take this medical red shirt and then find someplace else to play next season. My main concern is because, one, for his health, obviously, if if it gets to that point where he needs the medical red shirt, he doesn't need to stick around in an offensive system where he's just going to run more and take more hits, especially behind an O-line that has failed to protect him all season. And so moving forward in that, I was thinking about that too, of just this system in general does not favor him. Take this season, figure it out the rest, and, try to go someplace else that with the system that better suits his skill set. And, his skill set, I think, is a pocket passer. WVU made a comeback in the backyard brawl by sitting back and letting him be a pocket passer. The best plays from the Ohio game, I know a lot of Mountaineer fans have tried to block that from their memory, but they were from him as a pocket passer. This system just hasn't worked for him, and it's hardly working for the Mountaineer offense, but they might have found a spark this past Saturday. Could be. I don't know. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that later, but I think this is the right decision for Nicco Marchiol in his career. And, don't stick around in this situation where your skill set isn't being favored and it's not working. It's not working for the offense, it's not working for him.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that like it's time. And I think that's probably disappointing for Mountaineer fans too, is because Nicco, there was a lot of hype around him coming out of high school. Everybody
Yeah.
saw that.
Yeah.
Everybody saw that game where he made that comeback and like brought his team back from down 3 scores in the last 2 minutes, and he went viral for that. It was, I was excited. I thought he was great. I did have high hopes for him. I think he's a fierce competitor, a great kid, and he was always great to the media. Always appreciated that.
Yeah.
I personally, I'll be rooting for him wherever he goes. I hope he finds success, but I do ultimately think that this is the right decision for him.
Yeah, I have no reason not to root for him either. I do hope he finds success, but I've been saying for a while, even before the season, even when Rich Rod got hired, that I didn't think he was going to fit the Rich Rodriguez offense. And at the same time, I saw the quarterbacks in the spring, saw fall camp, saw the shortcomings of Jalen Henderson, who still looks rusty now and can't really throw with efficiency, knew that Khalil Wilkins was loved by the previous staff, but they also barely used him. And he's very, very young and inexperienced. And maybe it's his time now, but he's still inexperienced. We've seen a little bit of him now, but at that time, nothing. Same with Scotty Fox, young and experienced. What can you do? Pressure to win right away under Rich Rod. At the same time, despite thinking that Nicco Marchiol didn't fit Rich Rodriguez's offense and that he wasn't fast enough and it just wasn't a natural fit, that he was the best quarterback on the roster to open up the year as the starter. But that's also why I thought there was a ceiling on the season. And I still kind of feel that, say, Jaheim White, Jaden Bray, and everybody else was healthy all year, that this team maybe could be a bowl team. But with them not, they're likely not going to be a bowl team. And even with everybody healthy, and Nicco Marchiol as your quarterback in this offense, there just was a ceiling on it. So Nicco is a great kid. Covered him for years. No personal animosity there, but just didn't believe he fit. So I do feel now this is the best situation for Rich Rodriguez, for the Mountaineers, for the football program, and for himself. And once he got hurt and then self-diagnosed his injury that Rich Rod admitted he didn't know he was hurt until Nicco Marchiol came to the staff and said, hey, my foot's injured. There are people that believe his foot's been injured the entire season. There are some that believe he got hurt in the Ohio game. There are some that believe he got hurt in the Pitt game. Of course, the coaching staff is kind of leaning that he got hurt more in the Kansas game. Nobody knows for sure other than Nicco Marchiol, his doctors, and he's only seen doctors in Arizona and Colorado, not even in West Virginia. So the writing was kind of on the wall that once he got hurt, and his family is very invested in his career, maybe they also realize, and I do believe he's hurt. There are some conspiracy theorists that think he's not actually hurt. I do believe he's hurt, but I'm sure his family thought, okay, he's hurt. We're not now going to kill ourselves for the Mountaineers anymore. They're not going to fit him in. It's not going to work out here. He's not going to be the guy next year. So let's just take this medical red shirt. The Mountaineers are giving him a medical red shirt. And then once that was all decided, it does make sense for him to just move on and stay away from the program, really, because if Rich Rodriguez, we talked about this on the last show, if Rich Rodriguez is not willing to adapt his offense from what he's been running, and Luke, I guess I kind of understand it in a way, and I know I even have people here in the chat, and you always get from fans, especially the pro Nicco Marchiol camp, that you just got to cater to what skill set you have of your players. And maybe it was a mistake for him to stay and to be fully bought into Rich Rod and Hard Edge because he didn't fit in. Maybe they should have known that. Maybe Rich Rodriguez should have known that. But once they realized they didn't fit, there are some that believe the onus is on the head coach to adapt to the player. I know you've argued that. We've talked about that. But the only thing I can get from Rich Rod's perspective, his offense, when he does have the right guy, Luke, does work. When he has the right guy, his offense works. He's had more success than Nicco Marchiol for sure. And separately from that, if you're going to go down and have your win percentage bar that can get you out of the Hall of Fame consideration, your legacy ruined, the whole thing of him having pressure to win now, but certainly next year if this year doesn't go well, if that's all going to go negative for you and your Rich Rod, I'd rather sink my way than with a guy that I don't really think fits me. So maybe that's a stubborn mentality, but maybe that's also his mentality here. And that's where it is. But once you get to that point, knowing how stubborn Rich Rod is and knowing that he's not going to adapt, and you have Nicco Marchiol and everybody believes he doesn't fit, then this does make sense for him to move on. And maybe in retrospect, maybe everybody, the coaches, and even him should have realized the fit wasn't going to work ahead of time. And maybe he should have transferred prior to this year. But with the medical red shirt, he'll still have eligibility left. And yeah, I wish him well. But even if he wasn't hurt, I guess I'll ask you that. Say there was no injury here. Say there was no injury. Do you think he's back next year, or do you think that regardless of the injury, that because the fit wasn't working and Rich Rod's not going to adjust, that he probably still would have been looking to transfer?
I was thinking about that too. I think that, say he, like obviously not meaning to, speculate about an injury. Say
Right.
this injury came from running the ball during a play, takes a rough hit, in Rich Rod's system. That's a wake-up call. Football is one of those sports where the pileup of injuries can offset somebody's career,
Right.
especially if you're looking to play at the next level. And that's not me saying that Nico is like going to be like a draft pick in a couple years, but
Sure.
he obviously most likely has that in mind. Every player does.
Yeah.
So thinking about that in his future, especially in a year where it's just not working, and it's not working just whether it's a personnel thing or you know just whatever it is, it's not working. And this season isn't really going to be what a lot of Mountaineer fans hoped it would be. And I think that's a large part just trying to force the square peg in a round hole of having Nico go out there and try to run a system that he's not the best suited for. So I would say, even if that injury wasn't the wake up call, I have to imagine that the record at the end of the season probably would have been anyway. And, just trying to play this style of offense at the Big 12, not saying it can't work. It's just not working for Nico and it's not working for WVU right now. So I would have to think that transferring would be on the table if the season continued to spiral. I mean, they've lost the past two games by
Yeah.
a ridiculous amount of points. And a large part of that is the offense just hasn't been working. And, passing attempts in the last game against Utah, there were 13 passing attempts. In
Yeah.
a
Like
game where
three
WVU was
completions.
behind,
Yeah.
it was in a game where WVU was behind by 3 scores like early,
Yeah.
and they ran the ball 48 times. It's just like that's not sustainable. It's not. And I just don't I think this is a smart decision for Nico. And I think one way or the other, you have to think that he probably would have come to this decision that this is the best option for his career path.
Yeah. And it's maybe a blessing in disguise for him in terms of his career, because while he would have had a year of eligibility remaining and could have made this decision anyway, and again, to give both sides to this, Luke, I think he probably would have made the decision at the end of the year. Okay, it didn't work with Witchrod, and the program probably would have made the decision, because, as you know, when players are transferring, it could either be the player wants out or the program kind of tells them, hey, this doesn't really work out for us anymore either. You're best to transfer. It was a mixed bag this past year since Rich Rod got hired. Some players chose to leave after the spring, and a lot of them he sat down and said, we're quote unquote cutting you. So that did occur. And he maybe would have had to sit Nicco Marchiol down and said, I know you're going to be a senior, but I got to win next year. You don't fit. It didn't work out. You didn't do the Tyler Huff thing. Rhett Rodriguez and Rich Rodriguez spent the entire offseason saying Tyler Huff, the same build, the same athletic ability, also not fast, and he ran for 1,300 yards and won a conference title. Yet, that's not in the Big 12. Maybe it can work in Group of 5, but not in the Big 12. But it's just not working with Nico. And I think he would have realized it. So would the program. And he would have had one more year left to figure something out as a senior. Now, with this medical red shirt, he'll have 2 years of eligibility. This year will basically be a wash for him. And he can go somewhere else and have multiple years to figure things out, maybe entrench himself there, or, hey, if that doesn't work, try even a third program. That gives him a little bit of a cushion that he wouldn't have had if he played out this year. They had a 4-win year. His stats were bad. His film was bad, and it just didn't work out. And then the program, even if he wanted to come back because he had 1 year left, the program said, no, I don't think so. That then would have really screwed him over. So at least now, maybe it's a blessing in disguise in a way. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, as we were talking the end of the Nicco Marchiol tenure at West Virginia. Now, this is a polarizing question because Nicco Marchiol's tenure was incredibly polarizing. How are you going to remember the Nicco Marchiol tenure? And you already touched on that he was a 4-star recruit. He was a hyped up recruit. He had more hype around him than most quarterbacks that have been at West Virginia in recent memory. He was supposed to be the Neil Brown guy that would save the Neil Brown tenure. He never really got in enough under Neil Brown, obviously kept being the backup. He only would play when Garrett Green was injured. He does have the big wins. He was the guy that played most of the 2023 Backyard Brawl victory after they lost the year before. Obviously, this year he started, left the game. They were losing, blew the lead, and then he was the guy that led the comeback win over Pitt. So he has basically 2 brawl wins for all intents and purposes. He played lights out at Arizona in front of his friends and family. That was a game that lived up to the hype of the 4-star recruit and Nicco Marchiol. But outside of that, he had other wins, but they were mostly led by the defense or the running game. He didn't play well in most of those other games when he was out there. He kind of was a game manager at times, but never was near the recruit he was supposed to be. He never really even got the team to be fully Nicco Marchiol's team until this year under Rich Rodriguez, and he fit the Rich Rod offense worse than he fit under Neil Brown, really, in terms of what the coaching staff wanted to do. And now he leaves with this medical red shirt. He's going to end his career elsewhere. It's a polarizing tenure, to say the least, but it lasted several years. He was there a very long time. How are you going to remember Nicco Marchiol as a Mountaineer?
It's as a glass half full guy, I feel like you have to remember him for the 2 backyard brawl wins,
Yeah.
And I think especially in the final one where he really put the team on his back in a game where they subbed him out and never should have. And he still came in and put together 2 scoring drives, 1 in overtime to give WVU the win. I mean, that was just 3 scoring drives, really, because of overtime, and then there was the field goal drive, and then the touchdown drive at the end of regulation. It was just to step in at that moment in front of that crowd in that atmosphere. I think that's just an incredible thing. But there also it's kind of funny that you should mention it, almost this sense of what could have been too. And if, like I said, if you did have that favorable situation from a schematic standpoint or things like that. So that's I'll always think about that, but what could have been in terms of, uh, you know, if he was in a better system that let him sit back, be a pocket passer with a line that protected him.
Yeah.
But, you can't just push those 2 brawl wins to the side for how much that meant to the fan base and the people of West Virginia. I definitely think it shouldn't be
100%.
Fans should not look at what Nico's doing as a certain basketball player from the 2024-25 season So I don't think that it should be looked like that at all for a few different reasons. Like, one, this football team's future is not as solid as it seemed to be with the basketball team last year. And it's just, I think that this is truly what's going to be best for him. And I hope that looking forward, it doesn't turn into what could have been. I hope he goes to a place where he finds success and wins games and, settles into a good system that favors him. But yeah, for me, I gotta say those 2 brawl wins were really fun to watch with him going out there and winning them.
It's hard not to go to the brawl wins for
It
sure.
is.
I would imagine that's what he's going to remember his Mountaineer tenure for. I imagine that is what most of the coaches are going to try to fondly remember him for, the brawl wins, even him crying on the field and smiling with Rhett Rodriguez hugging him and then Rich Rod calling him a winner. It's just crazy how that was not that long ago. And now we're here with a medical red shirt and his tenure coming to an end. And it does feel like, though, there's a what if always going to be attached to it. And the weird part about the what if, Luke, is I get he was a highly touted recruit, but part of the what if, I'm not sure what else could have been done, because you were not going to start. There were some that wanted this, but it was just crazy at the time. You were not going to start him over Garrett Green, especially after Garrett Green. There were some that retrospective want to have Garrett Green win the Mayo Bowl and then be benched. And obviously he had a bad final year as a Mountaineer. He definitely regressed. The team regressed. But
it's you mean you wouldn't have put him in at slot receiver to start?
Right. I mean, that's always going to be a what if. Is
after the year he had at quarterback?
Right. Garrett Green should have after the year he had a quarterback, should have then been a slot receiver, and Nicco should have been the quarterback. That'll always be a crazy opinion out there.
That's ridiculous.
But the 2023 year, which have been the first real year that Nicco was even rumored in a competition, even though it really wasn't legit, you obviously weren't going to start him then, because at that point, Garrett Green had bought his time. He was the guy that quote unquote deserved it. He was under Jarrett Dagey and he was under JT Daniels, and he had to keep on waiting for all of those guys to usher out the door and learn from them. And then he finally got his time and he had his flashing moment. So Nicco Marchiol 2023 brawl win that gave you a flash that something could exist. That's kind of the equivalent of Garrett Green's 2022 Oklahoma win. He beat Oklahoma. He's the only West Virginia quarterback to beat Oklahoma when they were in the Big 12. As insane as that sounds. So he got that monkey off their back. And then people believed in him after that. And then, of course, 23 was that year where they won 9, won the Mayo Bowl. He was very clean, was a mobile dual threat. The real what if is if Garrett Green could ever played for Rich Rod, because they might have really fit together. But then the next year in 24, Garrett Green's last year, he started making mistakes. He wasn't nearly the quarterback that he was the year earlier, and the team didn't do as well. However, again, you're not going to go from the Mayo Bowl win and the 9-win season and how Garrett Green played that year, and then all of a sudden flip him to a receiver in his last year of eligibility and give it to an inexperienced quarterback that hadn't proven it yet, and Nicco Marchiol, despite being a high school top recruit. That was never going to happen. There's no coach who would have done it. Neil Brown, Rich Rod, Nick Saban, nobody would have done that. So that was never going to happen. And then you get to this season, Nicco Marchiol did deserve, I don't like the word, but he was the best option after the offseason to be Rich Rod's starter here in 2025. He outplayed Jalen Henderson, Khalil Wilkins, Max Brown, Scotty Fox, whoever you want to name from the offseason. He was the best option. But now that we saw several games, he just didn't fit. So best course for him to actually get this medical red shirt, have 2 years left, and for the program to also move on. And both sides probably want to move on after realizing the fit didn't work. So all of that can be true. And that's the only weird part about the what if story. Yes, you remember the Brawl wins. I'm also going to remember that he was mostly a game manager and kind of underwhelmed from what fans thought maybe he would be. I think the win total is elevated more than actually his level of play. He didn't play well in the 23 Brawl despite winning. Didn't play well against Cincinnati despite winning last year in 24. He had his moments that were bad, even if the team would win, but he did pick up the 2 major Brawl wins. We'll go down in history for those, and didn't fit with Rich Rod, and that's kind of my Nicco Marchiol story there. Again, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, everywhere you get your podcasts, and made possible by West Virginia Sports Now. It'll also be very interesting where Nicco Marchiol ends up. I would imagine we're talking about a non-Power 4 school if he's going to walk in and be the starter. If he is a Power 4 school, I don't know where that would be, and it probably would have to be a unique fit that certainly is away from the offenses he's been in. Do you agree with that sentiment that he's probably best to transfer down to save his career in college?
Oh, man, you'd have to think that he would probably have to move down to a G5 school and then kind of play his way back into, somebody that P4 teams would want to look at, just because the sample size of his play just hasn't been that strong.
I guess he could do 1 year doing that, and then he could have one more year at a P4.
He could transfer twice, and which,
right.
Love it or hate it, that's the landscape of college athletics nowadays.
Right.
I think that, like based on the sample size of his play, looking at, aside from the Arizona game last year, which, he played a very good game.
Yeah,
but also it's just like, he has 3 drives from the backyard brawl, including overtime. And it's not like, it's not like they really trusted him fully in the system in his redshirt freshman year, whenever he went out there and helped beat Texas Tech and Pitt in the brawl. So just based on the sample size, you'd have to think, I'm not sure how many teams would, from the P5 level, would really give him a shot, unless you're looking at one of those lower end P4 schools.
Certainly not pay him that much. Even if they give him a shot, he's not going to make that much money. And I know he got a raise from 24 to 25 to come back to WVU. They probably regret that raise. Obviously, that was wasted money now. But who's going to pay him what he's getting or even more? So he's going to take a pay cut even if he stays in the P4, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So that is true, unless he wants to go to one of the lower end P4 schools, maybe like a Northwestern or a Purdue or something like that, just to try to stay at that higher level of play. But then again, with the players that they have at those schools, they would get washed by in conference play still. So I don't know. I think he may have earn his way into a higher G6 school, looking at something like that. But I think that, wherever it is, I think the most important thing to help him showcase his talents is going to be the system. And, I can't go through and name you every other school's offensive style or anything
Right,
like
right,
that, but
right,
I'm
yeah.
sure that I'm sure that after this season, you'd have to imagine that there will be a fair emphasis on that whenever he's making his decision in the
I
recruiting
I
process.
would imagine, and I would hope for him, and if
Yeah.
his family is listening, I would advise them that more so than even the money, and everyone needs to get their money. I'm not going in anybody's wallet, but even more so than the money, this next move for Nicco Marchiol needs to be about finding the right system. Not even so much the right coach, because I do believe that he liked being around Neil Brown. I also do believe that he bought into Rich Rodriguez's hard edge mentality. I don't think he was lying when he said that he loved Rich Rodriguez's hard edge way. I think personality wise, Rich Rodriguez did like him. Again, the fact that he benched him, he didn't pout, he was still a leader, he showed the fortitude and the moxie to go back in there. I think Rich Rodriguez respects Nicco Marchiol as a warrior out there and as a player for him. I think he's not going to say that he loafed or was a slouch. He played with hard edge, but you can play with hard edge and be respected and not fit in the system. I think Nicco Marchiol needs to make sure that his next stop is a place that he fits into the system, wherever it is. I don't think they need to have this mindset they got to be in a P4. They got to make 300 grand at minimum or whatever. They need to go into a spot that is right system-wise. And if that is a group of 5, because in this era, Luke, it's not the same stain that it would have been 10, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. If you win enough games, you have a greater chance of getting in the playoff in this era, lower than a P4 than ever before. I mean, the great UCF and Cincinnati teams of the past, they were, Cincinnati got in, UCF did not get in. Schedules kind of moved them down in terms of respect. That's not as much of an issue now as long as you win. And usually there's still a big game or two. Look at Ohio. They played West Virginia. They played Rutgers. They played Ohio State. Usually those group of 5 schools that are worth a damn are going to have at least one or two solid game on the schedule. Not all the games, but one or two solid games that will allow him to showcase his talent against a Power 4. And maybe the other games will be able to really impress and put up some numbers because maybe it'll be lower competition than even his skill level. But regardless, he needs to go to a place that fits his system. And if he can go to a solid group of 5, a Tulane, something like that, and throw some points up and throw some numbers up and have some fun and win some games, even if at their level, even if he kind of gets a stain that he had to do it away from the Power 4, that's better than his value now, because his value now is a few solid moments, not enough film. I mean, I talk to coaches, they pick him apart. Like, he's won games, but the end of the 25 brawl and the Arizona game, that is almost it in terms of solid film. Texas Tech, film's not great. 23 brawl, film's not great. Even in wins, Cincinnati, film's not great, even in a win. So that's what he's up against now. And I don't think now that he's going to go on the open market, he'll have as much wiggle room to command things or demand things like maybe he would have had after 24 going into the 25 season at West Virginia. And in retrospect, maybe they regret coming back. Maybe the coaching staff regrets bringing him back. But now that you're here, it needs to be about the system. It needs to be about the right fit. And maybe he's better off. And even if it means going to a group of 5, maybe he's better off there. Just get you in the right spot. And if you want to transfer again, fine. But if you don't, you want to be somewhere for 2 years, then make sure the system is right. And that is the hope for Nicco Marchiol, that he's in a spot where the system's right. But if nothing else, Mountaineer fans will always remember the 23 brawl and the 25 brawl. And there are a lot of great Mountaineer quarterbacks that had better tenures that, well, because they didn't play Pitt for so long or just whatever the reason, they don't have those major backyard brawl moments for fans to remember. I mean, the image that I threw up there, Luke, I don't know if you saw it because it was before you certainly were with the outlet, but the image I threw up there on the update story that he's going to go in the portal, that's an iconic image. That's from the 23 brawl. That's wearing one of the Country Roads uniforms. That's him screaming after a big play in which he ran on the ground, because that game, not much happened at all through the air, and a little bit on the ground was enough based on what they did defensively. And that's an iconic image. He can put that on his wall someday in his house. So there were moments there, and he even has maybe, a couple signature moments that most backups don't ever get. A career backup getting 2 signature big moments, 3 big wins, maybe. That's something. And he had this, at least he gave it a shot with Rich Rod. Respect for that, for him being so loyal, but it just did not work. So I do think the legacy is going to be polarizing, but at least there's the great moments for fans to always remember, certainly from those brawl games. And it's a what if story, but I don't know how else it could have been different. I don't know what other decision Neil Brown could have made to be fair to him. You're certainly not benching Eric Green after a 9-win year. You're not making him play wide receiver his last year in college. You're not starting anybody else but Nicco going into 25, but the fit didn't work. Maybe he shouldn't have been there. So this is where we are. Again, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. So where I do want to go, kind of, I guess, putting a pin until we get more Nicco Marchiol news, but more will come out. We will find out eventually where he'll go. But right now, there's not a window open, so he's just going to kind of sit tight, likely in Arizona with his family, where he'll remain the rest of the year. Maybe he'll watch the games, and he can watch somebody else on the field. So we don't have an official announcement right now about the BYU game in terms of who's going to be the quarterback. I have leaned and expect it to be Khalil Wilkins. It could be Jalen Henderson, and I've seen the argument for Henderson again, and it's a good one, because if you're going to go to Khalil on the road in a time zone shift against a good team, that's a hard debut. I get it. Maybe you stick with Jalen Henderson because it's a hard debut. I believe they're leaning Khalil Wilkins because Rich Rod wants a spark and hasn't seen it from Jalen Henderson. That's my belief right now. Who knows for Wednesday before the game? But I'm going to ask you, what would you do for the BYU game if you get a green light from Henderson health-wise and you just are simply deciding who to start? And then where do you think the future of the Mountaineer quarterback position goes just the rest of this year? We'll get to next year in a moment.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I think I would absolutely take Wilkins. I think that, you know, thinking about it too, we're talking about with the Henderson argument. This is also Rich Rod, the guy who put Scotty Fox in to start the second half of the backyard brawl, and after when WVU was in like a neck and neck game after one half. So I don't really see Rich Rod being that kind of a. It almost feels a little bit too timid for him to say like, oh, I don't want the spark guy in there because, he's a freshman and experience. I
Yeah.
think he's absolutely. I would make that the pick for the starting quarterback on
What do you have to lose at this
Saturday.
point? Why not?
Exactly.
Like
No,
at this point,
exactly. It's not like this game is going to make or break your season. I don't think.
you
I
wouldn't
mean,
think.
and shoot, like throw him into the fire in his first game, like let him go. BYU is a great fan base.
Yeah.
They're having a good year this season. They're back in the top 25. So, I mean, this is trial by fire right here. Put Khalil Wilkins in there. Also, Khalil Wilkins this season is the only quarterback not named Nicco Marchiol to have a passing touchdown. And he almost he almost
Yeah.
had two on Saturday.
Yeah.
One of them with the OPI against Rodney Gallagher. But no, I mean, but the thing to me is Khalil Wilkins got into that offense and he looked comfortable. He was comfortable using his feet. Sure, he
Yeah.
had some errant passes, but he was putting it down the field. He was being aggressive, and
He
maybe
looked
that
he
was
looked more comfortable than Scotty Fox did for me, because they're both
absolutely.
young and experienced, and some people prefer Scotty Fox over Khalil Wilkins. They're both dual threat quarterbacks who mostly run. But we've seen them both now, and I do
Yeah,
think Khalil Wilkins looks more comfortable, and he's been a better passer. Scotty Fox has made
yeah.
2 really horrible decisions when he's trying to throw the football.
Yeah, and I mean Khalil Wilkins, the pass up the seam to the tight end, a lot of people will, there's enough blame to go around there on that play. Like Yeah,
Right.
it was a weird pass, but it hit him in the hands, could have brought it in, but you just kind of shake that off. But it was a good decision and it was perfectly timed. And I think that's the big thing right now is timing in this kind of RPO option read offense. And with Khalil Wilkins in his case, he threw it downfield. He threw it with some pretty good accuracy. He had
Mhm.
some good zip on a few of his balls downfield.
Yeah.
I really do think that Khalil Wilkins is the clear answer here. And Neil Brown was very high on Khalil Wilkins. He was
Very much so. Yeah.
talking about him like he was up next. And of course after Nico, ideally, I'm sure for in Neil Brown's case. But
Right.
I think, I haven't seen I just don't see Henderson as being the passer that they need, and I just don't think Scotty Fox's decision making is there to trust him with the offense. And not saying that Khalil Wilkins is, but thinking back to the tape from last week, I can't think of anything that he did on the field that was egregious enough to say you absolutely can't put him out there to start a game. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We might have the battle of the freshman quarterbacks on this coming Friday.
Yeah, maybe WVU can mirror what's happening in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns, maybe. And you go to one young quarterback, you give him a week or two. They're going to do it with Dylan Gabriel first. And then if that doesn't work, or maybe even if it does, because you just want to figure things out since they have a couple first-round picks for next
Yeah,
year, maybe
I
both
think
guys aren't going to be on the team. You then
yeah.
try the second guy. So to that point, obviously Rich Rod wants to win this year and wants to save this year. And I'm sure he still believes they can get to in the bowl game, which would be a major win for this season. But maybe you just kind of give both guys the time. Maybe you try Jalen Henderson a little bit again in the middle of games because you could have those two young guys start games, switch it off, Khalil Wilkins start, and then maybe we're still going to see Jalen Henderson if he's healthy. He's going to do rotation. So whoever starts is not playing the whole game. Somebody else is going to come in at some point. Maybe it's the young Scotty Fox. Maybe it's Jalen Henderson. Maybe he's trying to preserve Scotty Fox's eligibility, which is why we haven't seen him after seeing him initially for a couple games in a row. He actually was the guy that replaced Nicco Marchiol first in the Ohio game, which was initially what Rich Rod got annoyed with me because I asked him, why did you go to the freshman over the Power 4 transfer and put Fox in ahead of Jalen Henderson? After that question, ironically enough, we started seeing Henderson more than Scotty Fox because we saw Scotty Fox then in the brawl in place of Nico when he should never have really been there. And he threw those two picks, and that kind of was the end of the line for Scotty Fox. But blessing in disguise has been now we are able to see a little bit of Khalil Wilkins. And I will say something here. Maybe people won't believe me, but I swear on my daughters with this one that when the Mountaineers recruited Khalil Wilkins, one of my initial thoughts was just reading about him, hearing about him, and I'm not going to pretend that I knew and watched all his film down in DC, but just knowing about him and seeing his size, the film that I did watch, the videos that I did see, one of my first thought was, weirdly enough, this is a Rich Rodriguez quarterback. And that was before Rich Rodriguez came back. We're talking a couple years ago when they were recruiting him. And obviously that was under Neil Brown, and Neil Brown brought him over and ended up signing him. And he fit the West Virginia dual threat mold that Neil Brown eventually even said publicly, this is what we're going to have to do. This is Garrett Green. This is what we're going to bring in. He was going to do this, even if Neil Brown stayed. He said, I was going to bring in more dual threats. And as you're mentioning that, it was likely going to eventually be Khalil Wilkins' show. This year, with Neil Brown there, I'm sure it would have been Nicco Marchiol. He had loyalty there. It would have been Nicco Marchiol. But even if Nicco Marchiol had 2 years under Brown, and then it was Khalil Wilkins is just a freshman. At some point, Khalil Wilkins was going to play under Neil Brown if Neil Brown stayed and had 8-9 years at WVU. So you look at Khalil Wilkins now because Rich Rodriguez is there. Neil Brown is gone. I thought at the time that he was more of a Rich Rod style quarterback. He was that dual threat, but he really wouldn't fit under Neil Brown. Now Rich Rod is there. And I still believe that Khalil Wilkins provides you the highest ceiling of anybody on the current roster to run the Rich Rodriguez system. Once again, I'm now going to repeat myself because people try to misconstrue that into him being the best quarterback. I am saying that I believe Khalil Wilkins gives you the highest ceiling and the best chance of success to run the Rich Rodriguez offense, which, Luke, whether you like it or not, no matter whether any fan likes it or not. This is the system. He's not going to change it. He's also not getting fired after 1 year. This is it. So if this is it, and yeah, you can argue that stubbornness. I think he's also built a Hall of Fame resume doing it this way. And there's been peaks and valleys. There's been years where it didn't work out, but he's proven it can. So Khalil Wilkins is likely going to provide you that highest ceiling from even higher than Scotty Fox, who's fast, but he's even showing that he's not as comfortable, and the decision making is even worse than Khalil Wilkins. I mean, Khalil Wilkins so far went in is 3 for 6 for 39 for 3 for 6 for 63 yards, has a 39-yard completion, which is one of the longest plays from scrimmage for any Mountaineer this season. He also has 39 yards on the ground, does have the touchdown that you mentioned, a QBR of 82, and a completion percentage, obviously, of 50% there, 3 for 6. Nothing to fully write home about, but better than what we've seen from any of the backups so far, certainly even including Henderson when he had that start against Utah and what we've seen from Scotty Fox. So with Marchiol out of the equation, I would go Khalil Wilkins. And if Khalil Wilkins goes out there and throws 4 picks, then maybe give Scotty Fox another show, maybe give Henderson another look as well. Who knows? Make this a year of evaluation all year, like the Browns are kind of doing with their quarterbacks, and then see what happens for next year. But for me, Khalil Wilkins really fits Rich Rodriguez. Even body type, he looks like a Pat White. He's fast. He has that slender build, but there's enough bulk on him that he can take a hit or two. He, from what I've heard from coaches that were there with him under Neil Brown, they're even now with him now. Even the Neil Brown staff, when they were departing, I heard from many of them, including one night at the GOAT, when many of them were there, they all were saying, with Rich Rodriguez there, he's going to fall in love with Khalil Wilkins. That was said many, many times. He's going to fall in love with Khalil Wilkins because he's going to get flashes. Oh, this is Pat White 2.0. He's going to think this is Pat White again. And I'm not saying he's going to be Pat White. Pat White's a legend of the sport. But I think he fits into what Rich Rod wants to do better than anybody else there, and maybe better than anybody else he can get in the portal. But to go now to the future, I would imagine they're going to try to bring the young quarterbacks back in Khalil Wilkins and Scotty Fox. Brown and Henderson, eligibility will be run out and they'll both be gone. Nicco Marchiol obviously gone. Maybe Scotty Fox wouldn't want to stay, but say they both do and they want to compete, they're going to come back. And unless Khalil Wilkins becomes Pat White and shows you that the end of this year, no one's going to get any job handed to them. They're going to be in a competition. You bring the young guys back. And then I also imagine they go bring a veteran from a power forward that maybe lost some favor somewhere, kind of like a Henderson type transfer to compete with them in the offseason. And we kind of do this over again. Is that where you see it? And what, or would you rather just give it to Khalil Wilkins? Like, how do you think this goes next year, quarterback wise?
Sorry about that. I think you have
Yeah,
to
you
look at
muted
it.
yourself there. I was like, I didn't.
Yeah, I know. Well, like I have 3 roommates, so
No, you're good.
sometimes.
You're
So
good.
I think you have to look at it from the perspective of what does Khalil Wilkins show you the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I think that's the key point in all this. If he goes out there and he, God forbid, plays really well, wins a couple games in there, makes the offense seem like it has like some sense of rhythm. I
Yeah.
think you absolutely try to keep him around, develop that. I think he is too much of a Rich Rod type player to even think about moving on from him if you see enough flashes and enough positive play from him
Yeah.
to try to roll the dice on a transfer or put Scotty Fox back there and try to develop his decision making. I think that, Khalil Wilkins might be the guy. I mean, like, and I'm not saying that he definitely is. I'm saying might.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I think you put it beautifully where you said, he is the best suited player on this roster to run the Rich Rod offense. But also just that I think it's really evident that it's like night and day watching him and Nicco. Not, of course, not saying that he's a better player overall than Nicco.
Yeah.
He just absolutely is better fit for this system. He can take off. I'm sure he'll break some big runs with his legs before the year's over, and I'm sure he'll keep looking to sling it downfield.
Yeah.
So, assuming he is the starter this Friday, I'm very, very interested to sit down and watch that and see where he can take this offense.
And if he's not the starter this Friday because they're going into a tough road environment, because they're in a must-win situation, because they're facing a top 25 team, I can kind of get that thinking if Henderson gets the green light. If Khalil Wilkins is not the starter, fine. He'll eventually play in the game. He's definitely going to get into the game. Certainly if they're down big, he's going to eventually go to the other QBs. And I am almost certain he will start a game before this year's over. So even if Henderson starts at BYU, which again I'm expecting Khalil Wilkins to get the nod, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to be wrong. That was funny too when the Nicco news initially hit, and I've been saying I expected him to transfer if that happened. I put it out there again, and then somebody gave me my first reply was, "Well, are you prepared to be wrong if this doesn't?" It's like, sure. Like, yes, I am. I am pretty confident in my thoughts here, but if he would return next year, then I would be wrong. Yes, I would be. The world keeps on spinning. If I'm right a lot, but I'm not always right. Nobody's always right. I'm okay with being wrong every now and then. I'm prepared to be wrong sometimes. Sure.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about Khalil Wilkins. He could go out there and suck the rest of the year, and then Rich Rod could cut him. Who the hell knows? I'm just at some point he's going to start. I'm confident he's going to start at some point. I'd like it to be now, but if not now, he's going to get in, and you're going to see something. And what you're going to see likely from him is, as you mentioned, he's going to break a few runs. I think what he provides that Nicco Marchiol did not. He can make something out of nothing. If you look at videos from even the Pat White tenure, or Robinson in Michigan, or even Tyler Huff last year at Jacksonville State, a lot of what benefits the Rich Rod offense and the quarterbacks that really excel in it, certainly Pat White did this again, is if the play breaks down, they can make something happen out of nothing. Or if you see that Pat White had some of these runs, if you watch Monday Night Football actually, and you saw the touchdown run from Justin Fields. So they got blown out, but the Justin Fields touchdown run, and even the broadcasters were surprised because it was a quarterback keeper. He decided to keep it. It looked like it was a design play for him, but he was initially going to the other. He was initially going to the other. I believe he was initially going right. He was initially going to the other side, and the play started breaking down. And immediately on the broadcast, Louis Riddick said, "I was ready to criticize this because he was going, it seemingly at the tacklers. The play was breaking down. Nothing was going to happen here, and that was a fourth down play, if I'm remembering it correctly." And then
Yeah,
all
it
of a
was.
sudden, he got himself out of what it looked like he was running into a brick wall when he realized this is not going to work. And that might have been where the play was designed. And it's like a video game. He spun out, went backwards, which football 101, don't do that basically on a fourth down play. But he went backwards a couple yards, managed to get himself free, and then kind of curled around and then just outran everybody in open space and got in the end zone for a 40-yard touchdown run. A play was dead, and then he made it a touchdown. That play reminded me of watching that of Pat White under Rich Rodriguez. That is what Pat White did all the time. A play looked dead, and then fans would go crazy because it looked like he was running backwards, and all of a sudden backwards turns into 45 yards in front and a score. That is something that Nicco Marchiol could not do. Could not do it. He's not fast enough. He looked like he had ankle weights out. Maybe his foot was hurt, but he couldn't do it. He didn't show us he could do it. Khalil Wilkins can do that. He can do that. We've already seen flashes of doing that a little bit. So that is what maybe you're going to eventually see, where he'll make something happen out of nothing. He'll draw it up. He'll run the opposite way. You'll freak out. He's running backwards. Then all of a sudden he'll burn the other way. And he can throw it a little bit too. And the decision-making has been better than Scotty Fox. So that leans me Khalil Wilkins. We'll see what he produces the rest of the year. But hypothetically, say he performs the rest of the year and he plays well, and he's a guy you want to bring back, but he doesn't have like a Pat White 2005, so you're not locked into him. You want to do competition still. Do you bring in a veteran from the portal, kind of like a Henderson, to compete? Or do you have a competition between him and Scotty Fox, develop them? What do you then want to see happen if you like Wilkins, but you're not handing him the job in the offseason?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing in another transfer quarterback. I mean, I think either quarterback, especially in WVU's situation right now, the more quarterbacks, the better,
Yeah.
because you have more guys you can just kind of turn the keys over if something's going wrong. I mean, Rich Rod was doing that when WVU was winning, has been both winning and losing. So I think, you
Yeah.
have to think of those instances too. But also, I think about it, Max Brown is a junior this year. So I
Okay, you
think he
could
would.
bring him back. Yeah, yeah.
You could bring him back. I think he's, talented enough with his legs and his arm. Obviously, the tape from Charlotte is,
Yes, I
but
mean, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
but I think he's definitely the type of player who could, if given the pieces around him, maybe work out better in this Rich Rod system, more of a running quarterback there. But I'm not against the idea of bringing in some transfer quarterbacks. I think what, especially with how much of a mindset coach Rich Rod is. I
yeah.
think, you kind of have to think about the players who have committed and have stuck around for a long time watching WVU even through this slump, right? I think you have to, those are going to be the players who see something in the system and see something about Rich Rod that they like. And I'm not sure you get that to its fullest extent whenever you bring in a guy who just wrapped up a season at a different school, if that makes sense. I hope I'm
Yeah.
making sense with what I'm saying. But I think, he's he's given two freshmen consistent minutes at quarterback this season. He's, who would say that
Yeah.
you can't say that going into next year, any quarterback would be fully out of the mix for a potential playing
It could
time,
be
starting minutes. So
a
it,
five
it,
rotation competition
it could
again. You'd
be
like to
the
have the
exact same thing
competition
next year.
be whittled down to only one or two or three guys at the most. You like to have it narrowed down, even one quarterback versus another quarterback, but it could be five again. It could be everybody again.
Of course, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm thinking about it with too, is whoever he brings in, look out for him because he might just get on the field. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. If healthy and they're doing a competition, everybody might play. Uh, it might happen. And Rich Rod's kind of sold on it being a thing he can do in college football. We have seen it sometimes succeed in years past, even though not this year, certainly under Rich Rodriguez. So Luke Blain again, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, West Virginia Sports Now. That is more about the future of this program. And we're going to see a lot more of maybe what the future could be the rest of this year, regardless of the win-loss record. You need to see a spark. Maybe you want to find out what you have in Chloe Wilkins, maybe even Scotty Fox too, if you're Rich Rodriguez. There's a lot to play for if you're the coaching staff in this program, even if you don't make a bowl game this year. With all that said, the next one up is BYU on the road at their place against a ranked opponent. And then, fortunately for the program, they have a freaking bye after that because it's been a late bye. Rich Rodriguez has even said this publicly. They could have used the bye weeks ago. There are schools that had a bye 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the Mountaineers have yet to have one. So then they're going to have a bye. Then UCF, TCU. The schedule doesn't really get that much easier, and it ends really tough with Texas Tech and even Arizona State in there. But for this next matchup against BYU, is there a path to victory and a chance to upset the Cougars? This is the largest spread against the Mountaineers. Again, we really don't know at quarterback going into the game. At least it's not out there publicly. I put out what I think is going to happen, but it's not factually known. They're still very banged up. They could have some guys return. I think there's a good chance Ty Edwards returns, but nothing's a guarantee. He may not play again for sure. And the vibes of knowing the Nicco Marchiol era is over maybe aren't great for this team, but they're on the road. They're away from the fan base. BYU is riding high, and they're very, very good. Is there a path to an upset? What can be done to lead them to this upset? What has to happen for them to upset the Cougars? Can you try to give us anything in any of that, or is this just a wash and there's no shot?
I I like to think I have an any given Saturday mentality, and
Okay. Any given
I
Friday night
roll my
mentality?
I roll my eyes as I say any Friday night that goes into Saturday mentality because
Right.
with this 10:30 kickoff.
Yeah.
But I think, we've talked about it before, but this is another game where you're kind of seeing that mobile quarterback, run the quarterback style of plays, probably some option RPO mixed in there. Of course, I've said that the past 4 weeks, and WVU is only 1 for 3 in those games, or 1 and 3 in those games. And it's usually a situation of the defense waiting for the offense to catch up.
Yeah.
And this past weekend wasn't that. Utah had its way with WVU from the very beginning, and that's a problem. And I don't know. I haven't watched much tape on BYU, I'll confess, but they've looked good so far this season. They're 4-0, ranked in the top 25. I did watch a good bit of the game against Colorado. That was a great game. And Bear Backmeyer is having a really good year, both on the air and in the ground. 61 for 90 passing, right at the edge of 700 yards passing, 6 touchdowns. And on the rushing side, 37 attempts, 163 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he's getting it done both on the ground and in the air.
Yeah.
So I think you have to try to think that maybe the defense is a bit more settled in. Of course, Bear Backmeyer isn't a Devin Dampier. He's not this guy who's been around the game a long time. He's a true freshman that's getting the start at a P5 team.
Yeah.
So I think that looking at this, you have to think of the ways that you can put pressure on him whenever this defense does blitz. That usually works out a little bit for him, but just try to make the true freshman quarterback uncomfortable. I think that's a key for it. And also just settling down on offense a little bit. And of course, settling down on offense is not like something that they do. Like, even if things are going well, it's just the hurry up play after play after play. But you have to give your defense time to rest. I mean, of course, I don't think the showing was as strong, even if you would have gotten some more first downs against Utah. But I mean, against Kansas, I mean, the defense was just out there forever, it felt like.
Yeah, and they were exhausted at the end.
I
think that's why they played poorly at the end when they were better in the beginning of that game. And when you have a high tempo offense and then you have a 3 and out and it's immediately punting the football, the defense gets like a minute and a half break before they even sit down. You're already sending the punter out there because you're not even taking time in the middle of plays. So your 3 and out is 30 seconds quicker than most teams' 3 and out. That is a problem when your offense does nothing and you're exhausting the defense. And the defense was great earlier in the season. Even in the Ohio loss, the defense is great there in Athens. But maybe they've worn the defense out. Maybe they lost the chance to have the defense win them some games. I think the only path forward for the Mountaineers to upset BYU is they have to get, I'm saying it every week, they have to get turnovers. They got a lot at the beginning of the season. They haven't been getting as many in recent games when they've been getting blown out. They have to cash in these turnovers into points. They can't get them and then just have them mean nothing. A defensive touchdown maybe would really help out because they've still been waiting for that one, even with all the turnovers earlier in the year. And then separate from all of that, they need to find some rhythm or consistency on offense. I'm not expecting them to score every possession. I'm not expecting the Pat White offense to happen here, but they need to find some sense of rhythm, something that would make it so the defense is not exhausted, is not out there after a minute and a half. And they can go fire to fire with a good team that can score like BYU. And the only saving grace maybe for the Mountaineers in terms of the film they've been watching and even fans who checked out their last game for the Cougars against Colorado, not expected to be a great team. They did give them some problems. They competed in that game. They had moments in that game. They might be sitting there thinking they should have won that game. So if they can do it, maybe you can. That might be the thinking for the Mountaineers staff. That might be the thinking even for some fans that really want to be optimistic. But they got to get turnovers, and we got to see something from whoever's the quarterback that sparks the offense, provides momentum, provides consistency, and provides some rhythm out there. And I do think Khalil Wilkins gives you a better opportunity to get that done than Jalen Henderson, than Scotty Fox, than anybody you could throw out there. And even if Nicco Marchiol was healthy, I would maybe feel the same way. Because if you're going to run this offense, then there's a higher ceiling with Khalil Wilkins than even Nicco Marchiol there. With that said, though, even the Utah radio stations I've been appearing on, I do think BYU is going to win this game. I do think they're going to win this game handily. It's very hard for me to predict anything else from what I've seen recently from the Mountaineers. Even if Ty Edwards comes back, even if Khalil Wilkins starts and plays well, I would imagine BYU still wins this game. I imagine they still win this game by multiple scores. But what I will ask you to close this up, this spread, last I checked, I believe is 19.5. Maybe it's 18.5. It's one of those. It opened up at 19.5 to open the week. I've heard 18.5 from some, 19.5 from others. Say the spread is even the lowest common denominator there at 18.5, but I've seen it 19.5 for some. Utah covered the spread. Kansas covered the spread. And even their media thought those spreads were out of whack and they wouldn't cover those spreads, but West Virginia was so bad, they covered those spreads. Does BYU cover this spread?
Yeah. I can't. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of with you where they kind of go in there and win handily. I just don't think that I can't, a guy can dream about Khalil Wilkins going in there and just flipping the script for the entire WVU offense, but
Right.
I just can't. You could put Tom Brady back there, and I don't. Well, Tom Brady's not fit for Rich Rod's system, so
That's true. Yeah, that's
definitely
very
not.
true.
And he's not in a. I don't know if he would change it for Tom Brady,
Right.
but I think that I just can't think about trying to.
You don't
It's
have
not that I
visions.
don't.
I
It's
know
not.
you were
It's not
young,
that I don't
but
want
you
to be
don't.
nice.
You
What is
don't
it?
think this could be 2005 Pat White? It was around week 4 or 5. It was the same thing. He was the backup. He didn't start. He was the young recruit. No one thought anything of him. Nick Saban wanted him to make him a defensive back. At the time, nobody knew who Pat White was. And then all of a sudden, and that was to save them in the Louisville game, Pat White starts doing the Justin Fields runs on Monday Night Football. And I'm going to lose plays. No, I'm going to burn you. And I'm going to run 100-plus yards and lead West Virginia to a victory. And then all the bowl wins, become a legend and arguably one of the most electrifying quarterbacks in college football history. You're not predicting that to be the moment for Khalil Wilkins, that BYU 2025 is going to be his Pat White 2005 Louisville game moment?
It would be like the coolest thing ever, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna sit here
That
and
would be
say,
wacky. That would
yeah,
be
it's gonna
some
happen.
poetic thing that the man up
Yeah.
above, I think, would be shining down
You
on West
imagine
Virginia.
yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
wild. That would be
It would be wild.
That would
Maybe
be
it
really,
will
really
happen.
wild. That would be really, really, really wild. And hey, that would be fun as hell to cover. And if you get that, and then you get the rest of the year to be the same thing 2005 was for Pat White, then maybe you don't do a competition next year. But aside from that, even if Khalil Wilkins plays well, you're likely competing and you're likely bringing in a veteran and you're likely going to have other young quarterbacks there and you're likely going to have a competition again throughout the offseason. But I do believe Khalil Wilkins give you that highest ceiling to run the Rich Rodriguez offense, which, guys, breaking news here, that's the offense we're running. That's the offense West Virginia's running. That's the offense they're going to run. And it is the spread offense. It is Rich Rodriguez's offense. It's not exactly the same spread of 20 years ago, but it's still his offense. He's not going to adjust it. I don't think he would put Tom Brady on his team. They do not fit together. Tom Brady and Nicco Marchiol maybe could work together, but I just do not believe that Rich Rodriguez is going to adjust this offense for anybody. He needs to have the right quarterback that fits him, not the other way around. Pat White fit him perfectly. We will see if Khalil Wilkins fits Rich Rodriguez perfectly or whoever becomes that guy. And when he finds that guy, I do believe that whenever Rich Rodriguez finds that guy, whether it's Khalil Wilkins or whoever it is, regardless of everything else that people talk about in terms of money, resources, injuries, running back, defense, coaches, all of that, and they're all topics for another day. But regardless of any of that, I do believe that once he finds his quarterback, then they'll be able to win. I think he will overcome any other adversity you throw at him if he has his QB. I don't think he has that guy right now. We haven't found it. We haven't found it yet. We haven't seen it yet. It's not been out there yet. Unless it has been with Khalil Wilkins. That's really the only chance this year. But I don't believe that guy's been out there yet. We'll see if that guy ends up becoming Khalil Wilkins, and we'll see what the future holds. He's at least not been out there as a starter. But we will see. When Rich Rod gets his QB, I think they can win. But until that time, they probably can't. And maybe that'll be Khalil Wilkins. Maybe it won't be. I'd like to find out. I'd like to see. And then next year, we'll get to probably do this song and dance all over again. That'll do it for this episode of Mountaineer Report, kind of putting to bed Nicco Marchiol's tenure at WVU and looking ahead to the quarterback position this year and into the future. And do they have a chance against BYU? Well, find out at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday night, and stick with me until the end of the coverage at 3 in the morning if you're watching and tuning in on the East Coast. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here. Check out our coverage at West Virginia Sports Now and find Mountaineer Report everywhere you get your podcasts.